Hi, welcome to another edition of Relatable. I am your host, Stephanie Michele. Very excited to be here today with my guest. Also, see that I've voted. Hope everybody's voting and doing the research. Very important election. I'm sure you've heard that and you know that. And you know, there's a lot of great resources online to help you make good decisions. So don't think that you have to do this alone or ask a friend. So please, 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 please vote. Today we're going to be talking about the future, and in particularly technology and AI, and what we can really expect in our near future. I've said it many times on the show, I'm not anti-technology, but I do worry about how fast things are developing without careful consideration to the consequences of humanity. We can't expect big business, certainly not Amazon, not the biggest fan of Amazon, or our government to be on top of this. All we can do is make sure we, humans, are advancing along with it. For me, that means that, we take care of ourselves and we start to look at mental health like we need to remove all the stigma around mental health. I believe seeking out therapy or anything holistic in terms of kind of working out what's going on in here should be just as accepted as SoulCycle, yoga, or CrossFit. It should be up there. We should be able to go to franchises to get our head checked out. That's what I believe, and I hope that's happening in the future. I also believe in advancing how we relate with each other, because we're going to be facing some decisions about tech and AI that we really need to, slow down and make good decisions about. So I really believe that we need to really advance how we relate with each other so we're better equipped to make those decisions. So last night I had the pleasure of hearing today's guest speak at his LA book release of this wonderful book called The Very Human Future: Enhancing Humanity in a Digital World. And some of the things he said were quite scary, but he's very optimistic and very encouraging. And he has, he's given some good information about what we can do right now to better prepare for things. So let's meet him. So my guest today, he's all the way from London, guys. Oh, and I should say, we have a special guest. We have a studio audience today. My mother is here from Florida too, so we have some mileage in this room. So hi, Mom. She might peek in later. She's teasing us that she's going to photobomb, so we'll see. We'll see if she does it. All right. So my guest today is Rohit Talwar. He is the global futurist, award-winning keynote speaker, author, and CEO of Fast Future. He works with Fortune 500 companies, governments, and NGOs and investors around the world to help them anticipate and understand and shape emerging futures. He has particular interest in how we can create a very human future. Of course, he's a man after my own heart, by putting people at the center of the agenda. Rohit is the co-author of Design Your Future, editor of Technology versus Humanity. He is also the lead editor and contributor author for The Future of Business, Beyond Genuine Stupidity, Ensuring AI Serves Humanity, The Future Reinvented, Reimagining Life, Society, and Business, and two forthcoming books, 50/50 Scenarios for the Next 50 Years, and Unleashing Human Potential, The Future of AI in Business. His new book, like I mentioned, The Very Human Future: Enhancing Humanity in a Digital World, debuted this week in US and particularly last night in LA. So welcome.
Thank you.
Are you recovered from last night's event?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We were at a very cool venue.
Yeah.
We were there. The dome was just a very special place. It really brings people together. They have some incredible immersive technology as well. And so when you see that demo, you kind of get a sense of just how cool the tech can be and how much it can be used to create experiences that bring people together rather than push them apart.
I agree. And you and we were almost right in the room when that was going, or right center in the room when that was going on. And it was dimensional. It was 360 degrees of graphics around us. It was a very immersive experience.
And some beautiful artwork that was coming through in it as well.
Yeah, I loved it. So I'm going to ask the same question that I asked last night. I led last night, guys. We're going to wait for the air conditioning to stop gurgling because it's doing that. I led a very human moment in last night's event to help people connect and tap into intuition and curiosity. And I asked this question for people to use to network. I'm going to ask you the same question today. And I do this here in this context because I get to like unload and usually that monologue and say, hey, this is what's on my mind. I always want to give the guest that opportunity to do so. So that question is, what has your attention right now?
What has my attention right now is the event we're doing tonight. Just making sure that everything is sorted for that.
Yeah.
We're doing it in a Porsche dealership downtown.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful venue. They're being incredibly gracious in organising everything for us. But just making sure all the pieces come together so it's a lovely experience for everyone. So that's on my mind, but also this conversation. I'm really curious as to where this is going to go.
Yeah.
We've had a wonderful conversation already, and it went in all sorts of directions that I wouldn't have expected. So I'm really interested to see, how we also compete with the construction work going on upstairs.
It's all kinds of things going on. We got this.
Yeah.
We've done these things before. We can get this. All right. Well, so last night it was helicopters.
Yeah.
Because we were in a dome, and is it fabric? Is it what is the dome made of?
Yeah, I think it's a steel structure with a fabric overlay.
Yeah. So it's almost like being outside without being outside. A very planetarium type vibe. So.
Like being in a yurt.
It is like being in the yurts. Yeah, totally. My yoga friends. Shout out to my yoga friends. Oh, I also have to say before I ask you this first question, I want to joke about, I woke up today going, oh, I was one of Rohit's angels. You were like the Charlie, and the 3 women speakers were the angels.
Yeah, it was funny that it ended up being 3 women speakers last night. We do have a man from Porsche talking tonight.
Oh, really? Oh.
So we get a bit of gender balance there.
Sorry, guys. So he doesn't get to be Charlie's angel.
But it is, it's a joke, but it's also true that I think there are more women coming through pushing the agenda about how do we humanize the future than there are men. I think as men, we tend to get very excited by the tech and the potential of the tech and the boys' toys. And I think in general, you find that when you see initiatives that are about making sure that the future is a place fit for all humanity, that conversation seems to be being led more by women than men.
That makes sense. We were there. Well, tell me, when was the first moment that you realized some of these advancements or some of the things that were being developed around tech or AI, there might be some blind spots as to where these things were going, and where did you really start focusing on your work?
I think it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago when we started to see this wave of AI investment really taking off, and the big companies really pushing their R&D on AI and their investment in AI and starting to create things. And pretty much all the conversation at that time was about the cool things we could do with AI and the litany of human activity, behavior, emotion, thought that we could replace with AI with very little conversation about how we deal with the impact of that. There was an assumption, a sort of tech nerd assumption, that it would be a good thing, that you were freed up from all the things that you normally do, and that somehow you would go from being a 9 to 7 worker eking out a living to celebrating the fact that you didn't have a job and doing landscape painting.
Oh, boy.
And somehow your life would be fulfilled. There was just this assumption that everyone thought the same way as the tech developers, and that's when we started to think that there's a huge gap in the thinking here, and that thinking is about what you do with people as the tech becomes more and more pervasive.
Right. So, for instance, if we're replacing people in a certain industry with robots that are doing their jobs, what do you do with those people that are now unemployed? And who's responsible for those people? Is it government? Is it that employer that replaced them?
Well, and when do you look at it?
Yeah.
The temptation is to wait until the replacement happens and then try and put mechanisms in place. But then at that point, there's a wave of that replacement going on across a whole set of sectors. So you're trying to find 2, 5, 10 million people jobs all at the same time, which is really hard.
Yeah.
Whereas you can use some foresight to see what the likely path could be and prepare for the more severe scenarios. And this is where you start now to say, well, how do we raise people's curiosity, raise their digital literacy, increase their education, give them more skills in the transferable kind of skill sets, if you like collaboration, problem solving, scenario thinking, self-management. If we can give them those skills, then they can move from job to job more easily, and they can start their own business.
Yeah.
And then we can also start to pour support into how we help you start your own business. So there's there's a preemptive move required now, which is a sort of tenfold plus increase in all of the support at that level to prepare people for the future.
Do you see employers participating in this conversation, governments, nonprofits? Where do you see the most talk?
It's sporadic. You're seeing some businesses starting to realize that their staff need to be learning continuously. And again, it's some of the big tech companies, but they're providing just continuous access to all sorts of courses. They don't really care whether you learn basket weaving or machine learning. They want you to just be expanding your mind, constantly thinking, learning, and be flexible and adaptive, and to take responsibility for it. And so I think there's some stuff going on in companies, which is great. Some governments are starting to get it. The Finnish government has realized that it can't just hope that the society moves on. So they've created an education program for the whole nation that's available for free online, and it's accessible whatever your level of education. You can learn about AI because they think it's as fundamental as learning about mathematics. You need to be able to understand these things to navigate the world we're moving into. And then there's a lot of NGOs chipping away. Everywhere I go, I see some interesting projects trying to raise education, help people start jobs, help people create jobs, help people deal with digital exclusion. But there's nowhere near enough. And that's all being done on a shoestring budget. Did you say shoestring here?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, we do now.
We do now.
Yeah, heard it here first. And so they need to have their resources scaled up. But rather than trying to pick a winner, I think we need lots of experiments that are trying to move the needle forward.
Almost like we need like a UN initiative, right? We need more countries participating, big business, countries, government participating in this conversation right now.
Yeah, and the UN tries. So through its Sustainable Development Goals, it's identified these 17 areas of action, from women's empowerment to literacy, to health, to education, to job creation. It's identified all these areas that we need to be moving on. But the challenge is how you get 200 plus countries all moving in the same direction. And what you do have is some countries really getting it. So China is investing $429 billion in artificial intelligence at national, regional, and local level in order to make sure that it's at the forefront of what it believes to be the most important technology.
Do you think that they are more equipped or more interested in doing this because they have such a big population, like that many, they might be the first to be affected by it, loss of jobs or mass quantity loss of jobs? I
think that's part of it. I mean, they have to create a phenomenal number of jobs every year, tens of millions for the people coming into the workforce. Same with India. I think China would be doing this even if it was a quarter of the size. It's a mindset thing. And their desire to be a major global economy and the leading economic power means that they're looking at where they need to make the investment. And they see artificial intelligence as being the critical industry of the future, the enabler of everything else. So they believe they need to be there.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you said earlier, because I think it's really important to emphasize this, is the importance of always being in a culture of learning. So one of the things that we can do on a very micro level to prepare for some of these things that could replace parts of what we do or parts of our value is to learn all the time. I think that helps you be equipped to adapt to change, and it could be as simple as I heard this not too long ago of like going through the dictionary and just writing down words that you never heard very quickly, put them in a basket, and every day you and your coworkers go, oh, let's look at this new word and use it as a sentence today. But taking online classes, you said last night, and I thought this was brilliant. A lot of things you said were pretty brilliant, but I like this particularly. Learning doesn't have to be like a 6-week course. Like you encourage people in your company to watch a 30 or 90-second video on something, on a new topic.
Yeah, I mean, my company is perverse in this way in that we deliberately go out to recruit people who are really keen on learning, because the nature of our work means you have to be learning all the time.
Yeah. So
it's very unusual in our business that each member of the team isn't on a course. That might be a 3-week course, or a 3-month course, or whatever. And we attribute that and our willingness to delegate and trust to our success as a business. We've grown 8-fold from year 1 to year 3, and that's all down to the team's learning and our ability to hand off stuff to them. But it doesn't have to be continuous courses, as you say. One of the easiest ways of getting people in is either, as you say, to just pick a little topic each day to spend a couple of minutes on, or to watch something. We're all capable of watching a video. And on the web now, you have sites like Mashable, Cheddar, Futurism, Intelligent Engineering, who have all these great videos of change happening in the world. It might be very clever ways of getting water to rural areas, or it might be a way of protecting farmland, or it might be a novel construction technique, or it might be something you can do with artificial intelligence, or what someone's doing with augmented reality, or fantastic new ideas of public artwork. But they're 30 to 90 seconds long. So they're really easy to absorb. You can watch 2 or 3 of them while you're having your coffee in the morning. But it's a way of just drip feeding into people the change that's happening in the world, and gradually kind of breaking the permafrost layer that says, I know all I need to for the next 50 years.
Yeah, which is impossible. And if any of those topics seemed a little bit too much for you, I mean, don't forget that the #1 thing that's on YouTube is how-to videos. So you can, how to French braid, how to, the makeup videos, whatever, how to bake a cake. Learning is important, any type of learning. So anything that you're interested in, I would just say lean into something that you're curious about and start the learning there. And it could be as simple as like how to build a birdhouse, but just learn is the point.
And I would always start with things that are fun, like, what are you interested in, or what would you like to develop your skills in? So if you've never tried fishing before, how to fish, how to paint, a doll's house, how to do something really simple like knit. But I think it's going to be driven, at least initially, purely by passion. What do you want to learn something about? And then you can get fairly instant rewards because you get to try out the skill or the craft, and you get that personal satisfaction. And then you can extend it to what I need to know about the world of work.
I think the great thing about learning too is once you go down that path, there's always a community that you can do it with, or a community that you can explore. So it's also a path to that sense of belonging that I think is really important. That we try to do things to strengthen that. So, once you find something like, I want to learn how to knit. I know right now, a couple blocks from here, there's a little knitting circle that happens, every week, or you might find a meetup. But I think that's a second part of learning is like finding now a community that you can do that with too, and talk with. So.
And that's one of the fun ways in which technology has brought people together. All across Europe now, there are these little museums, like a beekeeping museum or a museum of a particular period of Estonian history. And in the past, you were there when you were worthy, but you didn't get many visitors. Now the internet allows you to find that segment of people in 7.5 billion on the planet who are absolutely interested in that. So you can bring them together, you can bring them to the museum for experiences, but then they get to socialize with each other. And you build a stronger community of which the physical entity is if you like, the mothership. But the community lives on long after it's left the mothership.
That's right. So last night, let's get to the tech stuff. Let's talk about, the scary. There are scary things, but I think that you have a great way of really being optimistic about it and having a plan towards it. One of the things that I really liked from last night's presentation is how you grouped the types of development into 3 categories. And I think one was barbarian, magician, not musician, magician, and then what was the third one? Aliens. So explain those 3.
So one of the things that digital technology has really brought about are these 3 different archetypes of innovators. The aliens are the ones who find these new technologies or even create them and very deliberately talk about them in a way that's obscure for the rest of us. They don't try and make them accessible. And so they talk about artificial intelligence, they talk about blockchain, they talk about cryptocurrency, initial coin offerings, open systems, all of these things. And they make it really hard because then they can get a premium on what they're charging for that. The rest of us hear messages that say, wow, this is going to be really important, but we don't understand it, so we have to pay for it. And our estimate is that less than 1% of the people on the planet understand those technologies at the moment. But they are going to be very central to the way the world works. And so there's an imperative for us to learn in order to challenge the aliens. The second group are more fun. They're the magicians. They create the developments that bring about a wow factor in our life. They solve problems for us in fun ways, or they create new value for us. So my favorites at the moment, one is a company called Trove. It's an insurance company. And it's sort of based its design on the dating apps, the whole idea of swiping right or swiping left. And the idea is that you've got a camera or some rare jewelry that you'd like to wear very occasionally. So when you take it out of the cupboard or you take it out of the safe, you swipe right to start insuring. And then when you finish using it, you put it back and you swipe left to stop. And there's car insurance companies like Metromile who only insure you when you're driving. But this whole idea of paying for it when you need it rather than paying for it all the time, I think is a massive change, and it really does bring a level of pleasure to the customer. And then the other one is a fun one, a company called Do Not Pay, created by an 18-year-old kid in the UK who was getting lots of parking tickets, and his parents said, we're not going to pay the fines anymore. So he started to use AI to find ways of fighting the parking tickets against the local authorities who were issuing those tickets in the different boroughs. And he was doing really well with it. So he made it available to the public. And he saved something like $7 million for people in fighting parking claims. He's now moved to Stanford. He's doing a degree at Stanford. And he's now created a version of the system that fights for refunds from airlines and hotels. Because apparently within US law is a provision that says if you buy an airline ticket or you make a hotel reservation and the price drops after you've done it, then you're entitled to the difference between the price you paid and the lowest amount charged. Now, no human is going to spend the time searching websites to see if that happens. But all you do is give him his system access to your inbox. If it sees a booking, then it goes off and checks up to 15,000 times a day to see if the price has dropped. And then it negotiates you the refund. That's wow. So you've got the aliens who talk an obscure language deliberately. You've got the magicians who just want to make our life more fun. And then you've got the barbarians who come in and know that they have to trample over everything in order to carve their space in the market and create dominance. CC Skype. They came in, basically challenged all the telephone companies, and now the dominant player in voice traffic globally. Uber, world's biggest taxi company with no taxis. Airbnb, world's biggest hotel group without a single hotel room. They've had to challenge the existing players in the industry, take them on. They've had to challenge regulation everywhere they go. But they've been willing to do that in order to get their disruption enabled in the law of the countries they're in. So they have to be pretty aggressive. And so those three categories are the most disruptive, in a sense, of the innovations we see, and they're all enabled by digital.
So we've seen a lot of disruption in industries. Do you have one that you're kind of watching right now that you think is going to be the next area? I mean, I would say insurance, because we were already talking about it. That's already happening. But what else? I
think a lot of financial services, there's a lot of fintech out there now that's starting to change. I think we really will see in the next few years it come true that we'll have banking, but not necessarily bank. I think an awful lot of services will just be built into our home device, into social media platform we use or whatever we've grown up using, in a sense, to deal with lots of stuff in our life. It will just become easier to buy insurance, do savings, whatever with that. As consumers, I think for business to business will be a little slower, but also the new wave of businesses coming through that are started by younger people. It makes perfect sense for them to use the same kind of technologies as they're using to create their own business. I think some of the other areas where we're going to start to see real disruption is the food industry. Novel manufacturing techniques, greener manufacturing techniques, vertical farming.
Less waste.
Huge amount less waste, a huge amount less transport miles for the food if you have vertical farms next to the food outlets that you're buying them from. Laboratory grown meat, laboratory grown all sorts of things. I think we're going to see a lot of disruption there.
What's in the UK? So here the fake hamburger is the Impossible Burger. Have you had it? What's your version of the Impossible Burger?
I've not tried it. I mean, there are various. I'm vegetarian, so there's a lot of people creating lab-grown things now. People creating lab-grown turkeys and all sorts of things. And the price is dropping quite dramatically. The taste is getting better. I think within a few years, we won't even be asking questions in the same way as we don't ask questions about corn and things like that anymore, tempeh. People are just buying this stuff and eating it as a replacement for meat. I think the lab-grown stuff will fill a growing niche in society, and we will start to push back on, you know, if you like, natural meats simply because of the amount of resources they consume to rear a chicken or a goat or a pig or a cow, and the gas emissions and all those things. We'll just start to say that's not an efficient use of resources. I don't know if we'll ever get to a world without animals for consumption, but you know, it's a possibility.
Yeah, at least less because of these things. Well, let's talk about the fun things. Let's talk about AI. You know,
right.
What are you most excited about? What's kind of terrifying? What do you think people should know?
So, I talk about these 7 stages of AI's evolution. Is it worth saying a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's why you're here.
Okay. So right now we see AI kind of emerging in all sorts of places, and 3 broad applications of the technology. The goal of artificial intelligence is to create algorithms, computer software basically, that mimic how the human brain works. Reasoning, planning, interpretation, creating language, understanding what we're seeing, all those kinds of things. And we're getting better and better at it in all sorts of walks. And what we're seeing is 3 broad types of application. So the first are where we're supporting the human in what they're doing. So looking at a patient's symptoms, comparing it to literally millions of cases on record, and coming back and giving the doctor a summary of what looked like the most likely and least likely causes of those symptoms. The doctor can then add their own judgment, experience, and intuition to make a decision about the right care for the patient. But you're augmenting the work of someone there. Then there's the ones where we're replacing human activity. So Accenture tell us that they've replaced 30,000 tasks that people used to do. That doesn't mean they've released 30,000 people, but they've eliminated the tasks. Another of our clients, who's one of the accounting services firms, tell us that they used to have a particular calculation they used to do around client balance sheets. And it involved a lot of posting of transactions to different ledgers and things. It took 16 hours, and it's a pretty boring job, and humans made mistakes doing it. Now the AI system does it in 4 seconds, doesn't make mistakes, and it's completely replaced the human. And then the third is where we're doing things on a scale that humans just couldn't imagine doing anymore. So when we want to search for information, very few of us would think of going to the library now and looking through hundreds of books to find things. We do a Google search. That's using AI. In drug discovery, in development of new drugs, AI can look at, create, and evaluate millions and millions of compounds in order to work out which might be the best fit to attack a target disease. Humans just can't do that anymore. So we have those 3 categories of application: augmentation, replacement, and doing things at scale. And then what you and then what you have.
They wanted to really give you like a drum. So
it was like, come on in.
Right on there. Like,
the people developing AI, the sort of pioneers, the leading researchers, their goal is to create systems that are genuinely as smart as us. And there's a sort of 7-stage evolutionary process to get there and beyond. So right now, the base level are what are called expert systems and robotic process automation systems that are just doing a series of if-then-else type rules at scale. So calculating mortgages, working out if you're entitled to a payment on your insurance claim, replacing humans completely and just doing that task. And there's loads of those now. The second stage is where we have systems that take human knowledge in order to resolve queries. They have some context awareness. All the chatbots out there trained with the knowledge of a human call center person, but then they're answering the questions on the human's behalf. The third level is where you're starting to see AI now being as smart as humans in a single domain. So a couple of years ago, we saw Google create a system called AlphaGo that took on the world Go champion and beat him by 4 games to 1. And they didn't teach it how to play Go, they just taught it how to learn and then guided it as it was making choices. If they tried to teach that system how to diagnose cancer, it would have forgotten how to play Go. So, it's getting things that are as smart as humans. Then they created another version of it called AlphaGo Zero, and they didn't give it any guidance whatsoever. They didn't even give it an objective. But after 3 days of training, it took on AlphaGo, which was world champion at the time, and beat it by 100 games to 0. So that's incredible. The fourth level is where you start to have machines that have some self-awareness. They understand how their own logic works. They understand something about human brains and emotions. And so you can use them in contract negotiation. You can start to see them working in sales situations. They're just coming out of the lab now. The next level is the goal of a lot of people in AI, which is artificial general intelligence, where you have machines that are pretty much as smart as humans in most of the things we do. Some people say we'll never get there, others say it might be 20 years. My view is within 5 years, we'll start to see AGIs that are as smart as 80% of us 80% of the time. They'll be good enough for a lot of things. They won't replace the way a doctor does something or a lawyer or an engineer. They won't do it the way they did it. They'll deliver the outcome in a different way, but they'll still deliver the outcome. And then anything they can't handle will still go to a human. Beyond that is a sort of sixth level where people talk about super intelligence, machines that just get smarter than us. And if you see films like Her or Transcendent Man or Ex Machina.
Humans, the series.
The Human series, yeah. Humans is kind of at the same level as us, and then this is one on. That's where you'll start to have things that are just smarter than us. So that when they get to be smarter than us, it's very hard to describe what they might do because we don't know. But they might redesign economic systems, government systems. You take the food chain, we waste 40% of all the food in the world today that's created. If we could redesign the global food system and get that money, that food to people who are living in poverty, we could eradicate poverty instantly. And AI might work out how to do that. And then the final stage is the goal of Ray Kurzweil, chief engineer at Google, which is called the singularity. This idea where superintelligence will work out how to network our brains, share our ideas, network our dreams. I don't really want people in my dreams. I'm quite happy with them being my own personal heaven or hell. And connect to the intelligence of animals, weather systems, plants, and really create this giant kind of Borg-like hive mind. To me, I could think of nothing more horrendous than actually knowing what someone's thinking when I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
Because you would just freeze up. You wouldn't know how to talk because you could know what they're thinking.
It's too much information, too. It's like,
and we might just stop talking. We could just communicate telepathically. You just watch people being slapped in bars without them ever saying a word.
I saw that. I heard that.
Yeah, exactly. There's those 7 levels. And we've got to understand that that's what people are working towards. And it could happen much faster than we think. That artificial general intelligence could be there within 5 years at a certain level. That's pretty rapid. And so we as a society need to kind of wake up and start taking responsibility for our own learning, for making sure we equip ourselves with the skills to keep feeding ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's a beholden to governments as well to start saying, what do we do to raise education? What do we do to help create new employment opportunities? What are we going to do to deal with the inevitable gap when jobs go and new jobs haven't been created? In quite as high numbers yet. And that's where you might have to look at things like guaranteed basic income.
All I can think of and many of the things that you just shared, because that was a lot, is the situation where the machine gets so smart that they're looking around and they're going, this situation with this Trump guy in the U.S. seems like a mistake. Like, how did this person, get here? And let's make a plan to not making him there or be against him. And it could be as simple as, the campaigns that were launched through social media to sway someone's viewpoint. It could be simple as that. Like the machines could do something like that.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
But even more concerning, I think, is if we don't have people in leadership that really understand how important learning is, and they're doing everything that they can to advance themselves, and they're okay with being wrong and showing their vulnerabilities because they bits and pieces about a certain area and say, hey, yeah, I'm learning more. If we don't have people that are really encouraging learning, there might be they might be a threat to all of this developing in a certain way. You know, they may, oh, let's push that aside, and in the meantime, we still need to plan for this. Like, we still need to get ahead of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at that point in history where we have to break the myth of the superhero leader who knows everything before everyone else, has all the right decisions, and makes all the right choices. And that's patently nonsense. But now we need leaders who acknowledge that they don't know this. Yeah. They're learning it, and who'd be open with their colleagues. Say, you know, one of the things I'm learning to do is to actually let go of ideas that don't work. You know, I'm spending time in a Buddhist monastery, you know, doing this, and just being really open about their own learning. That, I think, is probably the most powerful thing in organizations, to unlock other people doing some learning and to get people celebrating learning rather than seeing it as a chore. And also to just start being vulnerable in terms of saying, we don't know yet. We need to explore this, and we need everyone.
He said start being vulnerable, right? Not stop. Yes, it's really very important right now. I mean, we need to learn and we need to relate. You know, I don't know what you're experiencing in your politics in your country, but ours, like these parties cannot speak to each other. There is no opportunity for some of the things that we're talking about to happen. They're just delivering their talking points. Nothing's moving forward. You don't see a lot of middle making happening. It's just like, here's what we stand for. Here's what we stand for. Okay, let's keep arguing about it. That's not helpful. I mean, I would like to see our entire government go through a vulnerability course, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right that here there's no middle making happening. I come from the UK where there's not even an attempt to worry about the opposition. The ruling Conservative Party is in, you know, a permanent state of, you know, court upheaval, where, you know, the Prime Minister doesn't know who's going to be stabbing her today, and whether they're going to come from in front of her, behind her, or, you know, in her morning coffee. So they're so worried about their own internal chaos, which is all created by this vote on Brexit, where we voted with no one knowing what it was. And so the opposition are in a difficult position because they don't really know how to play it. So they've become largely irrelevant day to day on these things. But you're seeing it all around the world. You're seeing politics being very confused. You've got the big heroic leader types, you know, who are all about charisma and the soundbite, but aren't necessarily saying or doing things that are about the enrichment of humanity for the long term.
I agree. It's kind of sad. That's the more worrisome part of this equation than really the technology, is like where we stand at this, like, you know, the decisions that, you know, things that we have to do to really advance ourselves, to prepare for these things, I think is more concerning.
Yeah, I mean, in most nations, whether you've got a democracy of one form or another, or you have a monarchy or a single party state, all of them largely have embedded in their constitution a responsibility that says, you know, we're there for the betterment of the largest number of people. And yet that's so patently not true in the actions of what they do, that you wonder if some states should just go out and say, no, we're really focusing on the betterment of a very small number of people.
In our constitution is a perfect union. Which, first of all, perfect, you know, is that
or we need a radical shift in policy that starts to say, what are the things we're going to do to educate, to raise people's ability to look after themselves, to create a lot more new businesses that people start for themselves, to invest in the industries of the future, to tackle mental health. You know, really a very fresh agenda that genuinely puts people at the center, and then says to corporations, you have to exist in that world. So if the tax rate is 20%, you have no mechanism to reduce that. If you make $100 million in profit, you pay $20 million, at least for the transition period till we sort things out.
Right.
But we don't see it that way at the moment. The game is to see if you can get away with paying as little as possible.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, then how do you fund the infrastructure? How do you fund policing? How do you fund education? How do you fund healthcare? How do you fund government? How do you fund the mechanisms that actually make a society, and you know, give credence to the phrase that gets used a lot, which is fundamentally we're all the same. Well, fundamentally we're not at the moment, because we have very different approaches to serving different parts of society, and we're leaving huge numbers behind. Driving, I mean, I was really shocked driving through parts of LA on Sunday. I made the mistake of tapping Uber Pool or wherever it was, and then being on this elongated and painful ride through all sorts of parts of LA. But it did give me insights where I saw places that looked like they could be in Bayelsa State in Nigeria, which is one of the poorest places on the planet. I think it's 96% unemployment now. And you think, well, how does this happen in the world's richest economy and the most powerful economy?
And our state has a tremendous amount of wealth. I mean, I forget where. I think it's 1 or 2 in terms of wealth here. We could talk about that forever. Well, something that you just said. Let's talk a little bit about education. So we're kind of we've been talking more about what we can do now as adults in this world, but what how should children be learning? How should our schools evolve to be better equipped for rapid change and innovation, what may be coming in AI?
So in order to think about the future of education, we have to think about where it started. And organised education started because employers were saying to governments, we need people coming into the workforce with certain skills. And so government started to say, okay, how do we educate? And this is back in the sort of 18th century. 19th century, and they looked around at what was the best organizing model, and it was factories and prisons. And so that became the model, and what we were doing was creating economic units of production. I need 500 wheels, I need 50 levers, I need 40 of these human things.
Just raising the next workers, right? They need to have math skills, they need to know how to read, right?
And that's been the model that's been propagated by and large, except a few countries who have said, no, our job is not to create economic units of production, it's to create maximally fulfilled human beings with immense potential that they then go out and exploit in the world. And that's countries like Finland, they're an incredible education system, one of the happiest populations, one of the most productive, one of the most well-educated, and a society where education really is valued, not for its economic value, but for its role in creating a healthy and happy society. And we need to rethink education. We need to rethink, what are the skills we're teaching? And we need to think about how we deliver that to give people mechanisms to learn how to apply those skills in society. And that's true from, kindergarten, if you like, right the way through to adult education and retraining of adults. And we don't know how many jobs people will do in the future. We don't know what a 5-year-old entering school today will be doing when they leave the education system. What we do know is if a child going in at 5 today has about a 90% chance of living beyond 100, maybe 120, without massive breakthroughs, and there might be some massive breakthroughs. So, we don't know if in 110 years' time that there will still be a notion like jobs. But if they are still working, the notion of jobs will be very different. And it's very likely that they might have 15 careers in that lifespan and 40 to 50 jobs. We can't possibly train them for jobs that don't yet exist. But what we can do is give them the skills that are transferable. And those skills are things like collaboration, self-management, problem solving, scenario thinking, and negotiation. And those are jobs that are transferable, skills that are transferable from job to job.
And the ability to adapt to change, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To embrace change rather than resist it.
And things like accelerated learning that just help us learn faster. If you give someone that as a toolkit, then it will see them through life. It will help them change jobs. It will help them learn new jobs. It will help them create new jobs. And that's, I think a pivot point for the education system. Politically, the difficulty is that the people who run education in most countries tend to want to replicate whatever their educational experience was, even though it's out of date. And don't get that actually sitting behind a computer game might be the really best way of training this child for the world they're going into. And at the moment, I hear a lot of governments saying, "Oh yeah, we're revamping the education system. All our kids are learning to code." And when I say why, they think I'm crazy. I say, well, by the time they get out, the code will be writing itself. So you could end up with a lot of intelligent computer programmers who then just decide to hack your systems because what they thought was a golden career is actually, a dead end.
Yeah. Well, so we could talk about. Actually, you know what I want you to share? So you have a very unique initiative with writing this book and some of the other works that your colleagues and you have done. Can you talk about that? How you want to make this available? Because there's guidelines in here to help with these conversations and to start now and take initiatives. So talk a little bit about that.
So the structure of the book is that every chapter deals either with what's coming, how it's working, or possible ways of dealing with the challenges for society. And with each one, we have an opening question to really get people focused, and then a set of 3 closing questions that open up the debate relevant to your organisation. Secondly, with all our books, we give 10% of the profits to, if you like, a fund that we're putting into enabling change in the world. With this one, we're giving 50% of the profits. But then we're also scaling up, because what we're saying is if we really want people to change education systems, and that's where it starts, then we have to equip educators and students with the understanding of what's changing in the world. So we've made a commitment to give for free every book we write to any educator, any student aged over 16 anywhere in the world in electronic form. If people want to buy them in physical form, we let them have them at cost, so it's about 30% of the actual price. And that's a really simple mechanism where they can do that from our website. But it's a commitment from us to just give this stuff for free to anyone who's in the role of educating society, because there's an amplification role they can play there.
Yeah. So it's almost as if this book is a workshop. So they can use this book as a way to initiate conversations, to get and start the thought process now, test some things, experiment.
Yeah, it's a combination of a kind of map of the territory, a set of experiments to start trying, and a manifesto around what are the critical commitments we need to make to guide all of that exploration in the future.
Have you seen, as a result of this book, or maybe another book that you have out there, that an online community is formed to have these conversations?
So we haven't done so far. I mean, we see it being seeded in all sorts of places, and one of the most rewarding things is when someone says, "Oh yeah, I heard your book being mentioned in this meeting here with these ministers or these innovators," or "I was at this course at Singularity University and they talked about the book." But we are now creating an online community around this book, so that people who are seeing things that are creating a very human future or working on them can share what they're doing. So we just have this really rich resource that anyone can tap into to explore the ideas of a very human future and find very practical examples that they can learn from and latch onto, because we all love examples.
Yeah.
We all want to be first there, but it's really good if we have an example of someone else who's already done it.
Yeah, and it's safe to assume that if you're thinking about something, that somebody else is. So it would be nice to be able to connect those people and do the research together or share their notes.
And my gut feel is that what will happen is there'll be the conversation that happens here, but one of its biggest values will be the links that are posted to other things that are going on. So it won't even be a hub, it will just be one of the spokes on here that points to others, but it'll be a rich resource for people to find good ideas around this notion of creating a future where science and technology genuinely serve humanity and the needs of humanity are at the center of the conversation.
Absolutely. So is there anything that we haven't covered that you feel it's really important to just say in our getting close to the end of time together?
I think we've covered a lot of different things. I think actually the area that we haven't touched on very much was what you started talking about at the beginning, which is at the core of all this is a fundamentally different way of looking at humanity, not as people we're in competition with all the time, but as people we need to work with, as people we want to collaborate with, as people we want to relate with. And that whole notion of relationship being a good thing in of itself, rather than a means to something.
Yeah.
And how do we learn to relate better? How do we learn to talk in non-violent communication terms?
How do we value each other? I mean, I think that's thing that I'm most tuned into right now is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of things that things happening that feels like people just don't value human life. And even just on like the simple, like I can bring up pop culture examples, I can bring up political examples, I can bring up consumerism as an example, but not really valuing what we're doing here, of sitting down and learning and talking with people. That concerns me.
It does, and all too often there's a filter placed on that conversation which is money. So is there some value in doing this beyond the thing itself? So I love intoxicating conversations with people around the world who I've never met before, because they just enrich my soul. I can't put a dollar value on that. There isn't a kind of net present value calculation of spending 3 hours in a bar with a former chief of police in India who just talks to you about humanity in a totally different way. But it's been one of the most enriching conversations I've ever had. Yeah.
You can put a value on it in terms of well-being, because there's a ton of statistics around people that live longer with less ailments, less sickness. They have great human relationships. So we can look to that. Yeah. That's the only data that we have around it. But I think in general, so many people that I speak to that are inspiring, like they're starting to get this, or not starting. There's this general sense of like, okay, if you are an activist, if you see a problem and you want to stand up for that, or you see an injustice happen, you want to stand up for that. It's really, really quickly you have to see that, what, if I stand up here, I've got to stand up everywhere. That, we're not all the same, but we're not that divided when it comes to things happening. That if we come together, I think that things happening that are not fair, and it would be better if we came together and tried to work out solutions rather than like stay in these little groups going, but no, our issues are worse than yours. We need to tackle this first. It's like, no, we need to come together. I think Nadia from Women in Tech Hollywood, she kind of talked about this, what she's trying to initiate now.
And I agree, but I think there's also a pressure in society that does say, if you stand up on one thing, you have to be capable of standing up on everything, and none of us is that perfect. None of us is that capable. I think we should be far more supportive of people standing up for an individual cause they're passionate about, and acknowledging that they may be making mistakes elsewhere. So, I might be truly passionate about children and the future, but I'm not as good as I could be on the environmental management of my home. I don't look at every choice I make and say, what is the lowest environmental footprint choice? I don't know that. And equally, I think we have to change the way we think about those who we elect to govern us. Because we have a level of expectation of them now that is impossible, which is why we have such a dearth of good political leaders around the planet. Macron was seen as, the second coming, and has turned out to now be the most unpopular, in French history almost. And we have to just acknowledge that people can't lead a perfect life from birth and judge every choice they make based on how might this look in 10, 15 or 20 years time when I go for office. Equally, that doesn't condone people doing bad things. But I think the pressure of it means that bright people, caring people, are very reluctant to take public office now because of the pressure it puts on them. And so we end up with people who get into public office for other reasons. And, financial gain, whatever. And I think we need to look at the system and take some of the stresses out of it. I don't mean, I'm not condoning Kavanaugh and what he did or anything like that, but I'm saying, how do we become slightly more tolerant of people and their differences? And something I might have said 10 years ago shouldn't be held against me in the future. We're all allowed to change our minds.
Well, so what comes up for me in saying all this is like, so maybe the phrase stand up for what you believe in, because as we raise activists, we're raising an activist as talking points, and they get really, this is what I stand for. And that might be part of the problem, because in that equation, it's independence over interdependence. And what we're really talking about is like, yeah, there is no such thing as a superhero leader anymore. We really need to lean into leadership groups and really talking about, like, you didn't get here alone. Like, you have all these wonderful people that inspired you and have educated you and, you know, keep you going. We need to put more attention on that. And maybe as people stand up for what they believe in, they equally need to just be in conversation with other leaders, activists, so we can promote that over the one person or the one issue. It's like we need to just be in group dialogue.
And there's something you referred to earlier that really brings that together for me, which is this idea of middle making or path making. That I can be passionate about a single issue to the point of just ignoring everyone else about anything else and not accepting any evidence that challenges my point of view, which is what you get on climate change.
Yeah.
Or you can say, you know, the goal is to think about what is a greater good here. Forget whether I'm for or against climate change. I should be about protecting the environment for future generations and making sure that human activity isn't damaging the environment. So whether I'm a skeptic or I'm a convert around climate change, my goal should be about acting for the best interest of humanity, and therefore how do we reach agreement to get there? And we sort of had that with Paris and the climate accord, and then, you know, the US pulled out, and now, you know, there's just this kind of war going on between scientists, which has become very political and not necessarily very action-oriented now.
Yeah. All right. I really want to end on that note. But
No, but then there are some very positive things happening, and there is an agenda there. Sorry, it was not the scientists who aren't being action-oriented, but the politicians behind them aren't. And I think we need to trust the science again a little bit more, because that does give us some very, very positive outcomes. I have got one story that I love telling about people who are doing really interesting things in the world in a different way.
Okay.
It's a business in the UK called Elvis and Cressa.
Elvis and Cressa.
And they make handbags.
Okay.
Right. So you wouldn't think this is a world-changing business. But the way they started was, there were two venture capitalists, and they're a couple. And they spent 3 weeks looking at rubbish tips, looking at what people threw away. And they discovered that the UK Fire Service throws away something like 70 tons of fire hoses that are irreparable. And they pay something like, let's say, $500 per ton to throw them away. These guys discovered that they're made of the same material as high-end handbags. So they now have a contract to take those fire hoses from the UK Fire Service for free for the next 20 years. They turn them into these high-end handbags, and then they give 50% of their profits back to the fire service charity. So they're actually caring for firefighters who, you know, put their lives on the line.
Yeah.
That kind of model now, I think, is a really interesting one and a hopeful one, because you're doing something good, you're reducing waste, you're serving the fire service, and you're creating a business that's creating jobs, and the owners are getting, you know, a commercial return. And it's one of those ways where you can get a win-win all the way around.
We saw this like with Tom's shoes, and then there's a glass company, glass company, and then it seemed like it wasn't trendy anymore. You know, we stopped hearing about them, but I'm hopeful that hearing this story.
And I think we're seeing a whole new breed of these, and that to me is kind of where I would want to end. Is actually there are lots of these things happening that create a more human future.
Yeah. And it's what I hear, or what kind of comes in my mind when you say this, it's like closing the loop on, you know, how things were produced, how it's helping the world. It's not just consumerism for the sake of consumerism. It's like it's doing some good, and every part of that equation has been considered.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. All right. So that puts us at perfect time here. We can do one thing though. So because you've been talking. You have so much information, and I'd like to give the audience a chance just to hear something else about you. So often we'll ask just an off-topic, silly question, so we get to hear a little bit, because I've experienced you. I know your sense of humor, so I want to see if we can share that with the audience. So are you okay with this?
Yeah.
It's a random off-topic question. Okay, what do we got here? Have you ever been fired?
Have I ever been fired? Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Is it a good story?
It's not a brilliant story, but as a kid, I used to work in a shop that sold electronic watches and electronic goods. And I was like, they used to do most of their sales at the weekend because I was there and I was like really interested in the stuff. So I would explain it to the customers. And the guy who was manager of the store was stealing stuff. And in the end, I told his boss about it. And then I got fired because I was they just decided they didn't need me. He decided they didn't need me.
Of course.
And the boss basically knew that he couldn't fire the guy who was running the shop all week. So that was the only time he'd been fired.
Huh. That's a good story. All right. Well, so we get to do 2 more things before we leave today. But that was an interesting answer to that question. So the first thing that I always ask the guests to do, we talked about all of this tech, and now we're going to go very human and ask you if you'd like to share a heart swell to somebody. And what a heart swell is just a dedication, a shout out to someone that just said, I really want to share these words with you. I want you to know that you're important in my life. The reason why I ask people to do this is just to show that it's not that difficult to do, and we probably should be doing this a lot more and picking up the phone and calling people and tell them that we love them. So first of all, are you willing to do that?
Absolutely.
Does someone come to mind?
Yeah.
Okay, so look right at that camera.
I'm going to choose 3 people.
Okay.
So Charlotte, Hannah, and Alex, my 3 incredibly gifted, sensitive, and beautiful children. We don't get to see each other very much because the girls have been off at university and my son is always busy doing stuff. But when we do, it's always beautiful for me. And I just want to say how much I love you and how proud I am of you for following your hearts in all that you're doing.
Awesome. And I think your son's having a birthday next week, right?
Thursday.
Thursday. So happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Alex.
Happy birthday, Alex. All right. Well, so if you want to buy this book and learn more about Rohit and his work and his partners, you can go to fastfuturepublishing.com.
Yeah.
We will be sharing all the links and more information on how you can get this book and others. There's how many others in the
There's 4 now that we've
4, and you have 2 in the Word?
Yeah.
How do you travel and write books all the time?
Well, the whole team works on writing, and you find inspirational moments in planes and trains and in hotel rooms.
Yeah. You keep the inspiration going. All right. And last thing we get to do is I always issue a social challenge of the week. That's something that was inspired by our conversation. And what I'm leaning into strongly is just learning. And I think the idea of finding a video, committing to maybe watching 1 a day, or, if you can get up to 3 after 2 weeks, that'd be awesome. But 1 video a day. First of all, explore what you're curious with and go with that. And then Google, or you can get on YouTube and ask how to around that thing, or what were some of the other sites that you liked for?
Yeah, Google and YouTube, as you say, are brilliant for the how-to type videos. And then if you want insights into, what's changing in the world, then sites like Cheddar, Mashable, Futurism, World Economic Forum, Interesting Engineering, Now This, they all have lots of really great videos of just what's changing in the world and fun stuff.
We'll share all of those in the archives as well. So good to do that.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank
you so much. This was great. I put you on the spot. You talked a lot. You feel warmed up because you have an event tonight. You got to do this all over again.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. You got this. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Like I said, we'll be sharing all of Rohit's links and links to the book and fastfuturepublishing.com. You'll hear all about that. Next week, we are going to be talking about dealing with a very specific kind of workforce burnout. I will be joined by Georgie Speakman. And that is the end of today's show. So as always, if you heard something today that inspired you, you can reach out to us and make sure your links. I think your Facebook handle is on our screen right now. You can reach out to me at Love More Now or at Relate with Steph. And I just want you guys to relate with your core curiosities. See you next week.